My parents actually were Christian missionaries, and so they sort of traveled around a lot. And I spent a lot of my time growing up in Phnom Penh in Cambodia. Did all of my work at a much faster pace, and I actually finished school and went to university when I was 16. So that's why I moved to Australia, was to go to university. Burlesque is the art of tease. It's about, at its core, it's about making the audience want more. When I'm creating a burlesque work, I get to wear lots of hats, you know. I'm the performer, I'm also the writer, I'm also the producer, I'm also the music editor, I'm also the lighting designer. And now I get to perform the thing. I'm like, yay, it was all worth it. Like, so it's hard for me to not feel joyful on stage because I'm like, well, at least I'm not doing administration.
She is an intellectual powerhouse with the wit of a world-class entertainer. Rachel is here to challenge minds and light up the room.
Sometimes people will come up to me after I've performed and they'll say like, your body is so beautiful, you know, like, oh, this is so, you know, you look so hot or whatever. And I always think like, wow, that's so, I've spent hours and hours and hours writing choreography, perfecting technique, sewing costumes, all of this actual artistry. And the thing you're going to comment on is the one thing I actually had no control over, you know, like who cares what my body looks like? That's not what I'm putting on the stage. Like the one I'm putting on is the art and the effort and the skill.
Is that the creative in you or the rebel in you?
What's the difference? Who you are in other people's minds is really, it belongs to them and it doesn't belong to you.
Rachel, thank you so much for making the time to have a conversation. I have had the fortune of watching you perform, watching you dazzle audiences, but interact with audiences so gracefully and, you know, bring in so much value to people who sit there and watch you perform. If I take you back to the beginnings, tell me about where performance started for you and what does that origin journey look like?
Oh my God, what a good question. I think that probably I was always a performer. I now have 2 kids and I watch my kids and I look at the littlest one and I'm like, that's a performer. You know, I think there's like something intrinsically in there. But I was my parents actually were Christian missionaries. And so they sort of traveled around a lot. And I spent a lot of my time growing up in Phnom Penh in Cambodia, which was pretty soon after the Pol Pot regime, which meant that, I didn't have, I didn't actually go to school. I did sort of distance education, which is similar to homeschooling. And there weren't, you know, like playgrounds or cinemas or any of the usual things that kids would go to, including dance classes. So I never really, I didn't really engage much as a performing artist through my youth. But I was playing the piano because I'm, you know, an Asian child, and this is like a very typical. And so I was a classically trained pianist, and for a little while I was playing the piano in hotels in Cambodia, and then I think one day I was like at a restaurant and I was very dramatically ordering my ice cream, and someone, actually an Australian, saw me and he was like, I think that you should come and be on this Cambodian television show that I'm working on. I was like, okay. And so at first I just did some sort of like outside acting spots. And then slowly he had to pull away from his main producer role to do other work. And so I started being the main producer of a television show called Hello Cambodia, which was on the Cambodian television network, which was like an English teaching program. So I would speak in English and then be a translator, and then we'd explore sort of the grammar and structure of language and watch music video clips and break down the language. And so, and I was only, where was I? 15, 16 when I was working as a presenter on the television, which is such a weird intro. Like, so this is my first like proper job. And then I moved to Australia later on when I was 16. And I obviously know Australian television would be like, we accept this previous work experience. So I swiftly stopped working on the television, and I just sort of kept like playing piano a little bit, but it really started to taper off as I, you know, became an unruly teen. And then it was only in my later teens, sort of like 18 onward, that I actually started to like engage with dance classes and really like connect with that sort of performer side of me, probably the performer as you have seen it. Yeah, it's much later in life than you'd expect. A lot of people are like, oh, I've been dancing since I was a kid. I was like, no, I only started dance classes when I was maybe 18.
But it's a classic Asian story, right? Like, you have so many instruments, we get to play a few. The piano, the violin, the cello. But that gives you discipline. That gives you discipline in music, in rhythm.
Yeah. And how to learn.
Correct. And how to learn something is very important. I'm very interested in this dramatic ordering of ice cream, which is something they need to do next. To go get some ice cream and see how you order ice cream. But what did that very early film or very early TV production teach you about performance, but also discipline? Because at 14 and 15, that's not a big skill that kids have in their life.
Yeah, I think at 14 and 15, I actually had quite a lot of discipline, like because I played the piano, but also because I was doing distance education. It's not like I went to a school and the teacher was like, this is what you're doing today. It was like very regimented of like, there's all of these papers, they're very boring, you have to do a certain amount. And I was like very encouraged to be like, well, the more that I do it, the faster I'll get through it. And my parents had a very good sense of discipline, and they really like enforced it, like they shared that value set with me. So it meant that what actually happened is, instead of finishing high school when I was 18, I like no, how old are people when they finish high school? Yeah, 18. Yeah, instead of finishing at 18, I did all of my work at a much faster pace, and I actually finished school and went to university when I was 16. So that's why I moved to Australia, was to go to university. So I think the discipline was already truly like was really embedded in me, and so I was able to just apply that to the Cambodian television network. This idea that the more that you are perceived, the more people perceive you. Is this idea of, suddenly I'd be, like walking down the street and people would start like quoting me to me because they'd seen me on the television. And I was like, oh, like I don't know this person, but they like clearly know me, or, and not only do they know me, but they have a perception, an idea of who I am and what I'm like. I'm like, oh, that's so interesting, because like who I am, or like how I'm presented on this in front of the camera, is like totally different to who I am at home, totally different to who I, and it's sort of, it was I guess my first introduction to this idea that, who you are in other people's minds is really, it belongs to them and it doesn't belong to you.
And that's really good perspective to say, hey, look, it's in their minds.
Yeah.
And they have formed that opinion. Does that teach you about how to manage judgment also as a performer?
No, it doesn't teach you. No, it's like you're faced with judgment, and then there's like the crippling upset that comes with that. But no, like the how to manage it, I think, came a lot later. That's like, that took a lot of time. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me about how you set up your identity as a performer, in terms of whether it's the dance, whether it's the performance side of it, whether it's the choreography side of it, whether it's the fighting side of it. How do you set up your identity as a performer?
I just go about doing whatever it is I'm doing. And then only retrospectively, when looking back, I'm like, oh, the kind of connecting through lines of this. And based on what I've done, it seems like this is the identity. And then, okay, well, if that's the identity, if that's the perceived identity, what's the identity that I actually align with? And then like tweaking my work going forward. Like, I don't think that I sat down one day and was like, today is the first day that I begin Jazida as a persona, and Jazida will be like this or not like that. I think it sort of, it was much more organic. It sort of happened, and then as it was happening, I would start to interrogate it and then like be a little bit more curated. And I guess, how did I go about curating it? Is that...
Yeah. Look, you're also showing me how you went to university at 16
Yeah.
because you can't connect the dots ever looking forward.
Totally.
But you've got to be able to catch yourself to go,
Yeah.
okay, I've done these 3 things.
Yeah.
What does that now look like?
Yeah. So I guess there's a lot of just connecting in with my own value sets and what the core things that I care about are. Like what's the purpose of creating the art or the work? Like, am I doing it because I'm like, I just want to be on the stage, I want to feel big and powerful. Like, is that the driver? And if that's the driver, I mean, it's a valid driver if that's what I'm about, but is that the reason? Or am I trying to like share a particular message? Am I being a storyteller? And so I guess, figuring out like, like classic boardroom workplace, like what are your values? And like you look at all of the values and you're like, let's shortlist it down and sort of isolate it, and then been like, okay, well, if this is what I value, why am I taking that gig? Or like if this is what I value, then why would I make this work? It makes more sense to take this work and like do it through a different perspective, because then it feeds in, so I guess there's a lot of internal interrogation to figure out what it is I want to get out of it, who I want to be as a creator, as an artist, and as well as like my own values and who I want to be, or who I want the brand to be, if you want to be like really wanky about it. But also, I feel like when you see really good art, or when I see art that really connects with me, and I'm talking about performing arts, because that's sort of where my focus is. But when I see performing arts, often the artist will be answering a particular question or interrogating a particular theme. And we as the audience might not explicitly know what that theme is, or like they might not tell us directly, this is what this is about. But when the artist knows what it's about, there's a real like cohesion through the act. And it's like the whole time you're watching it, you're like, I'm on board, I get it. And sometimes I see performers who they've got this sort of idea and they'll perform, but then they'll make decisions like partway through the performance, if they take their shoe off, and they'll like throw their shoe. And I'm like, that's weird. I feel like that character would place the shoe lovingly, and what it speaks to is with not a solid concept of what is the question that I'm answering? Like, what is this act actually about? If you want to get into like the terminology, I guess it's like the dramaturgy of the act. So I think, when I'm deciding, what I do, or like what choices I make, or how do I build up this persona, a lot of it is around, okay, let me really define what is the question I'm answering? What is the theme that this piece is interrogating? What am I trying to say here? Even if the audience don't know, even if I don't tell them explicitly, just like for me to know internally.
Is that drive to tell really good story through your performance the thing that's driving you to look at how you set up stage, how you choreograph an act, how you edit a video and put it out? What's the drive to be involved in all of those facets?
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the things that really drew me to burlesque as an art form is that it's one of the like modalities where you just have so much creative freedom. I'm like, when I'm creating a burlesque work, I get to wear lots of hats. I'm the performer, I'm also the writer, I'm also the producer, I'm also the music editor, I'm also the lighting designer. And so I'm able to say like, oh, well, if this is the story I want to tell, through the lens of a writer, what do I need to do to tell that story? Through the lens of a lighting designer, how can I uplift that story through this different lens? And so I think that's why I get like so excited to be involved in so many different parts of the creation, is because I'm like, oh, it all gets to tie into this same like underlying theme, which creates like this really nice cohesion. So I guess like creatively wanting to have a lot of control, but also like I know what the theme is. Other lighting designer, you're undermining what it's about, So I guess control, or like wanting perfectionism, I guess.
Tell me a little bit about burlesque as an art form.
Mm-hmm.
What drew you to it, but also how does it help you express who you are?
Yes, so burlesque is the art of tease. It's about at its core, it's about um, making the audience want more. So it's often typically associated with like striptease. So it's sort of like, I'm going to take off this glove. Now you see it. And there's this sort of build up of anticipation. And then they're like, yay. But burlesque, dating way back, was originally about parody. It was about making sort of observations about what's happening in society, about the political climate. And I think burlesque even today is still like everywhere, but particularly in Australia, very political, very like can be quite grungy. And yeah, it's like it's a lot very narrative based, not just about like being a pretty showgirl, although that is also like a very valid part of burlesque and that like is also very enjoyable and exciting.
I want to know about burlesque as an art form, how you connected with it, and how does it help you express your identity?
The answer is the same to both parts of that question, which is the thing that I said about this full creative control. Before I was in burlesque, I was doing belly dance. And with belly dance, certainly with parts of belly dance and with parts of lots of different modalities, there's this idea of like correct and incorrect. You know, you're either doing this movement or this style of dance accurately in line with how it's supposed to be done, or you're doing it inauthentically or wrong, or you know. Whereas burlesque, there is no right and wrong, which is the main thing that appeals to me, but also is the main reason why I'm like, well, I can really tell any story, because there isn't a right or wrong. There's like whatever it is that I tell is what I tell, and how I tell it is how I tell it. And so yeah, that's the thing about burlesque that really drew me in. The other thing about burlesque, and I mean, I'll say it for all subculture, underbelly, lowbrow art forms, is there's sort of this big discourse on highbrow versus lowbrow art, which is really what they're trying to say is we're going to deem an art form based on its like perceived social standing, it's like class versus, and not on its artistic merit. And I just think that these sort of underground subculture art forms like burlesque come to exist because, like, in spite of being considered lowbrow, in spite of not being funded. A lot like if you're an island and you have no lighthouse, the government doesn't build you a lighthouse, and boats keep crashing on your island, eventually the people are like, oh, we need a lighthouse, and they will like get in together and create this public good. And it's something that serves everybody, but they're like, this is something that needs to exist, and if it's not going to be created for us, we're going to make it. And I really feel the same, this idea of public good. I feel the same about subculture art forms. And like, these art forms exist. They pop up in bars, in nightclubs, in dingy underground situations. They like show up in all sorts of weird places. And it's because there's this urgency to the work, and the creators are like, I've got a story to tell. I've got a thing I want to put on, and they just make it happen. It like organically grows, like the weeds. Even if you try and put them out, even if you don't give any funding to them, they just keep popping up. And so I think there's something about that too that really appeals to me. I'm like, this idea of the lowbrow, the urgency of an art form that just is so organic and that just like can't be stopped, you know? So I think that's also part of what drew me to it.
Is that the creative in you or the rebel in you?
What's the difference?
Same. The same one I think has targeted energy.
Yeah.
Which is the creative in you is willing to go back, reflect, and think of the narrative and the story.
Yeah.
Versus the rebel in you, in my perception, is the one that's going to take a chance, the one that wants to move things forward, the one that doesn't know what the next step looks like, but wants to take that step.
Yeah, I reckon my creative and my rebel are both pretty similar. I think that what's driving me creatively is also like, well, let's just see what happens. Like, let's give this a go. I don't know how it's going to turn out. You know, a high risk appetite applied in different ways.
And we'll get more into the high risk appetite with your practice routines and all of those things. But I'm really keen to unpack to somebody listening to this podcast, they might think, okay, look, lighting design and set design, and you're performing on a stage. And I'm going, yes, you can perform on a stage, and I've seen you performing on a stage. But sometimes you're doing amazing crowd work. Sometimes you're performing in the wonderful Barbe route, which has a narrow passage.
Yeah.
And the crowd loves it. The owners love it. How does that agility in set design, in performance, how do you think of that? Because sometimes people go, oh, you can do all of these things when you have control on a stage. You don't have control when you're performing in a tight space, but you're still doing amazing crowd work.
Yeah, but I think I'm just having fun. I'm just doing whatever I like. Yeah, I actually think I'm just having a lot of fun, and I'm connecting with people, and I like to think of it when I'm doing that sort of work. When I'm at Barbe Route, I'm like, look, all what we're doing is we're curating joy. These people have probably had a long day at work. They've probably had a long week at work. They've probably had a long few months at work, and they've chosen to come out tonight. They've probably paid for a babysitter. Maybe they've had to organize an Uber. They've maybe had to try and coordinate friends. They've put in the effort to come out because what they want is to have a night. They just want to have a night off. They want to feel good. They want to laugh and be relaxed. And I'm like, my job is to support that in happening. And so I'm like, if I'm having fun, they're having fun, So I think, I guess, there's a few different types of work that I'll do. Sometimes I'll be creating a piece of theatre or an act or a full length, hour-long show, and it'll be really considered and okay, what is it that I'm trying to say, and why am I saying it, and what's the urgency, and it'll be very carefully considered. Sometimes I'm actually all I'm here to do is to light up people's lives and make everyone feel happy and joyful and share in joy. And sometimes those two worlds can collide. Sometimes I can pull in a pre-existing act that does have a more in-depth driver to it and be actually, I can slot this into this space and share joy through, while also getting to overlay this fun little story or question. But also sometimes I've just got work, there's also the workhorse versus the unicorn. And sometimes I'll be they want me to do this corporate gig. They're going to pay me a lot of money to wear a spangly costume. And I'm just there as, essentially just eye candy background. I'm look, I'm not telling any urgent stories. I'm not really communicating anything in particular in those circumstances, but I'm taking money and then I'm being able to use that money to then fund the unicorn. I'll use the workhorse in order to create the work that is urgent and meaningful to me. So I think there's a bit of a span between the different types of work I create and what the motivation is. And I think that all of it is valid.
I love the theme of joy because you seem to understand very clearly the purpose that you're there. But you also, after many years of performing, you answered saying, I'm having fun.
Yeah.
How does look at the life of a performer, the life of a creator isn't always linear. How do you continue to find joy in your performances?
I that's a great question. I always love it. I think that the performing is the highlight, the joyous part, because I think that 80-90% of a performer's life is awful back of house administration. I'm sewing costumes, and I'm programming my LED feather fans on a computer for hours, and I'm writing grant applications and I'm getting denied grants and I'm accepting grants and I'm acquitting grants and I'm, there's just so much behind the scene that is
the non-glamorous.
Oh my God, sending an invoice, paying an invoice. Oh God, and so when it's and now I get to perform the thing, I'm yay, it was all worth it. So it's hard for me to not feel joyful on stage because I'm well, at least I'm not doing administration. At least this is what it's all for, the hours of slogging is for this moment. It's also very satisfying, because I'm, sewing the costumes, painting the silk, I'm like gluing the rhinestones, I'm cutting the music, I'm doing all the things. And then when I get to go to the stage, I'm like, and now I get to show all these nice people my hard work. And it feels very like satisfying and a sense of achievement. And I get to have fun and they get to have fun. Oh, we're all laughing, you know.
I'd love to unpack a little more of how you choreograph routines, how you bring dramatic effect into them, how you work with the skills of you as the performer, but the needs of the audience. Tell me a little more about how do you do that?
Wow, there's so many elements to your question. I guess one thing that really excites me in performance, and one of the things I like to do, is set up an expectation and then subvert, then suddenly do something that's counter to it. So you sort of like you're like, oh yes, I understand this character. Oh, like I'm playing an archetypal female. You know, that there's which archetype? Maybe she's the matron or the maiden or the femme fatale or the, you know, like pick which of the archetypes. I'm like, oh yes, she's established this character. Oh yes, like a maternal, oh, a domestic housewife character. Oh yeah, I know her. I'm familiar with this archetype. Oh yeah, it's that archetype. It's that archetype. It's that archetype. And then suddenly doing something, being like, "Ha, you thought I was this archetype. Well, guess what? I'm also this other one." And it's the idea of like something unexpected. So sometimes I like to do something unexpected by like subverting the archetype or like looking at a character and doing something different. But sometimes I like to do something unexpected, like, I take off a glove. Oh, but what? This next glove is like 5 meters long. And it's this idea of like the audience being like, oh, I know what's happening. And then them being like, oh, that's not what I thought was going to happen. I think that I like to create those moments. That's very exciting to me.
And to the audience, because it's the element of surprise in you, that suspense keeps them locked in with the performer.
Yeah. I also think it's like also that thing that the art of tease, it's about making you want more. And so I think a good way to set up this wanting more is to like give them little surprises all the time. They're like, oh, I wonder what more could come. Yeah. I guess when I'm making acts as well, there's this I talked about the dramaturgy. So just understanding like what it's about. And sometimes an act is like a vignette, you know, when an audience watches me, I want them to be like transported, like they're looking at a painting and they've like got, you know, zoomed in and jumped inside the frame and they're like just watching the scene play out. And maybe there's no narrative, anything that happens, but they're just transported to this other world. Sometimes I want to do something like ask questions like what the example I gave about let's assert a particular female archetype and then flip it on its head and then ask the question like if a girl is like a little lost maiden and, you know, she's, you know, Little Red Riding Hood, she's so, you know, she needs the help of a man or whatever, she's so helpless, to then flip it around and be like, no, she's the one who's like going to kill the wolf, you know. Maybe I'm like making those kind of questions. But, you know, like my longest, most booked act is my like circus theme act where I'm like dressed as a ringmaster and I come out and it's like a very commanding, like very sharp choreography. And then there's an alarm, a change in the music, and then there's a quick change magic. So I'm suddenly in a different dress and I've got fan veils and now I'm transported to a different character. I'm now more of like a clown persona and I dance like that for a while, then the music changes back, I quick change again, I'm back to the ringmaster character, and then I finish out the act. And when I originally created that act, I was like, oh, this is fun, you know. I like quick change magic, that's exciting to me, that's surprising, that sets up an expectation and then breaks it. And so I sort of just did it. And I'm like, oh, I like fan veils, so I'll do fan veils in the middle. And I sort of created this act, and then over years I like kept on refining it. You know, I've now been touring that act for a decade. Wow. It's had new costumes. It's had so many different versions of the music. Actually, it's the original act used to be a belly dance act, and that's like almost 2 decades old. And then I sort of like put it down and picked it back up as burlesque later. Anyway, as I refined the act, looked back, I was like, oh, at the time, even though I was unconsciously making all these decisions. But now that I look back, I actually see that what that act is about is this idea of wearing many hats. I can be a multifaceted person. I can be the ringleader and I can be the clown. And if I have to change at a drop of a hat, I can. Because the question internally that I was exploring was, I'm more than one thing. And I think probably why that at the time that was so urgent for me is because I'd recently had my second daughter. And so, there's a lot of stuff that goes on with identity when you've got a kid, and especially when you've got two young kids, because you're like, well, I guess I'm just a mum, or, like, can I be this and that? It gets very lost, or like, actually, I can be all of these things. Actually, I can do all of them. And I feel like there's a societal expectation that I can't, but these were like internal like things that I was struggling with. And so I'm like, oh, of course it came out in the act. Of course, unconsciously, I ended up being like, I'm this character, no, this character, back to that character. And so when I was able to reflect and be like, oh, dramaturgically, that was what that act was about, then with that information, I could refine it a lot more. I'm like, oh, if that's what it's about, then I'm going to make the ringmaster movements in this world, and I'm going to make the clown movements in that world so that there's much bigger distinction. Because I just was able to understand why I was doing it, and then put a little polishing touches and make decisions. Like I said before, if I take off this shoe, do I place it down or do I throw it? What is the motivation? And having that understanding is really satisfying.
There's a science to building a character.
Yeah.
There's a science to maintaining the character's consistency, not in your mind, but in the audience mind.
Yeah.
How did you get that skill? Is it through practice? Is there places to study and research?
Through practice, but definitely through study, for sure. Through a lot of practice, but I mean, attending a lot of workshops, hearing from a lot of experts. When artists were touring from interstate, I would host workshops and I would attend, workshops and just do lots of upskilling sessions. And so just through group workshops, but also private workshops with different artists who I looked up to, they were able to shed a whole lot of light on the process, or ask me, make me interrogate my own work. So that was really useful. I was very lucky to have received a bursary from Onstage, ACT. And as part of that bursary, I was able to attend a dramaturgy course run out of the UK. And that was really, that dramaturgy course, I only did that 2 years ago. And that was much more aimed at, I guess, show creation as opposed to just act creation. So a lot of that sort of stuff around creating an act, the science of creating an act, that came a lot earlier, like I said, through the one-on-one workshops and things. And then the dramaturgy course really helped solidify that knowledge, which I already had, plus expand it out greater and be like, okay, well, if this is the world if this is the character you're making in that act, what's the world that it sits in? When does the audience engage with it? When they buy the ticket, is that when they receive an email that says, you've been cordially invited, come through the back door, or, and it immediately starts their mind thinking in the world? Or do they just get a normal ticket? And when they get to the door, they enter the world when they walk through the door? Do they enter the world when they walk through the foyer? Do they, these sort of questions were more in the dramaturgy course. It's a much bigger scale for the whole show as opposed to just the act. But yeah, so yes, the answer is through doing and through a lot of different types of training.
You're clearly a deep thinker about what you do while you're having lots of fun. But let's dive into a little bit of burlesque. Mm-hmm. You're not only taking your gloves off most of the time.
Yeah.
What is your perception of your social media sometimes requires you, or
my God,
us as people require each other to be some version of perfect?
Yeah.
What do you think of body positivity?
I mean, I think that all bodies are amazing. I think that anything that tries to tell you that a particular body is right and another body is wrong is really just fundamentally grounded in colonization, and it's a lot of Eurocentric beauty standards. And I sort of just think that I'm I think that we should really reject the entire notion that like you have to be positive about a body. I'm like, all bodies are great. There is no like, yeah, and the idea of like, so I see it with people around me where, like perhaps a performer with a less conventionally considered body type will perform on stage, and when people will be like, "You're so brave," I'm like, "They're not brave. What do you mean?" But even me, and like as far as like queer femme person of color bodies go, like I'm pretty like conventionally Eurocentric standards. Like I'm like pretty much considered like in the good range, But even me, I'll still get people be like, "Oh, you're so I can't believe that you would be so brave to show your body." I'm like, that's so boring. Like, I just think it's just so, and I think it really speaks to the person who's saying that hasn't yet interrogated that idea of it within themselves as to like, why is that even interesting? There's when sometimes people will come up to me after I've performed and they'll say like, "Your body is so beautiful," like, "Oh, this is so, you look so hot," or whatever. And I always think like, wow, that's so, I've spent hours and hours and hours writing choreography, perfecting technique, sewing costumes, all of this actual artistry. And the thing you're going to comment on is the one thing I actually had no control over, like who cares? Who cares what my body looks like? That's not what I'm putting on the stage. Like the one I'm putting on is the art and the effort and the skill. And so I think that you can come up to me and be like, "Your body looks so hot," or you can come up to me and be like, "That body looks like shit," or whatever. Either way, I'm like, put all of it in the bin. The positive compliments and the negative compliments. I'm not interested in them. Do you know? Like that's not what it's about.
And that's the framing that I think most artists who get into it are looking at. But you still have an audience, and your audience is extremely diverse.
Yeah.
How do you build up? It's not really courage, because it doesn't require you to be courageous. It just requires you to be strong in people's judgments and people's opinions. How did you build that up? And is that something you always had when you started performing, or did it get stronger over the years?
I think that it comes from just that, what I was describing, just a very clear understanding of like, actually what a body looks like is not a value. It's not actually the value. And like, not just like cerebrally thinking it, but like truly believing it. No, I did not always feel that way. Oh my God. No. I like, I spent like many years like very unwell. I had like quite a severe eating disorder. Kids who grew up in the early 2000s, and like, yeah, I like had very bad, like thinking and patterns around like body and body type and like, and actually, getting into dance was one of the really big healers for me. I would like be very critical of my own body and like have a lot of like, I guess like dysmorphia and feel terrible. Ridiculous. I've never been a different size to what I am now. Do you know, like which just tells you how much of it is, it's like conditioning. It's what's in people's heads. And I found that when I would attend, dance classes once a week, if I missed a week, I would fall back into those same patterns of feeling very bad about myself. But when I was attending classes regularly, I was like, no, like my body's strong and it can move in these ways. And I like, was able to access like the gratitude to my body beyond just what it looks like. It's like what it can do, And so that's actually how I ended up in a pattern of dancing all the time, because I was like, oh, I can't miss a week. If I miss practice, I fall back into these bad habits and this like bad headspace. And so then, I started doing it. I started making classes regular. I was doing like 2 or 3 classes a week. And I sort of I at the time had to maintain it in order to maintain my mental health. And then eventually I was like, well, if I have to do it anyway, I may as well be getting paid to do it. And so I would start, I started doing like gigs. And, as time has moved and as I've like, spent more and more time, particularly in burlesque, where you see so many human forms, you know, like you're backstage, I've seen every body type, I've seen every boob shape, you know, like, and what you come to realize is I'm like, oh, all bodies are beautiful. And this idea of like assigning a value is so preposterous. And I've like saw how damaging that way of thinking had been for me, and like really done the work to undo that. And so now I'm very firmly like, we don't play over there. That's just not, it doesn't help. It doesn't help me. It doesn't help them. We just ignore it, you know?
And it could be a sign of the times that we grew up in.
Yeah.
We did grow up in a time where, you know, there was a perception of a perfect body. Could have come from colonization. I don't know. I'm from Sri Lanka, and lots of colonization that happened there also. Gin and tonic was one of the good things they left. But I think for kids growing up now, it's amplified even more with social media and what their perceptions of perfect bodies are, what their perceptions of, you know, what type of body a person you need to be successful.
Yeah.
If you had an opportunity to chat with a young emerging artist who's struggling with body positivity because of what somebody had said on social media or something like that, what's the one thing you would tell them?
I don't even think I would tell them anything. I would just get them to be in the space, you know, like just come backstage, like be around it, and you learn very quickly. I think like the advice is like come and see for yourself. I think is you'll like, yeah, because it didn't take me too long of like being backstage and like being on burlesque stages, or even being audience members in burlesque shows and seeing different bodies on stage, where I was like, oh, it's all of this, like essentially what is brainwashing is just, you know, it doesn't serve. Who does it serve? It doesn't serve me.
And it's most of the time from people who are just critics, not people who have done anything.
Yeah.
Just people who have an opinion.
Yeah.
But speaking of people who have done something, you do fantastic stuff with and dangerous stuff with fire eating and your acrobatic routines. Tell me about, where does that courage come from? Because that takes some courage.
I think that I've always had a very high risk appetite, and I used to hang out in some of those like fire spinning crowds, and they would, you know, do their poi and spin.
Where is the fire spinning crowd that used to hang out in?
Oh my god, there used to be one in Canberra. It was called Poi in the Park, and it was once a month, I think, and week, I don't know, and they used to go to Glebe Park and they'd spin fire. And then I also used to, when that sort of died down, I ran one at one point. The problem is you need someone with insurance to book the public land and do all of the paperwork and take all the responsibility. And so I used to book them, and I would teach some fire workshops as well. But yeah, there's usually like some sort of like a fire spinning community that likes to get around and do prop manipulation, and their focus is more like to access a flow state. It's like flow arts is how that they refer to it. And so I would be around these sort of fire twirlers, and I'm like, oh, that's so exciting and interesting. And I would like sometimes play with a little bit of fire. And then later on I like watched a lot of fire eating performers, and I was like, oh, that is so cool. I want to learn to do that. And, you know, and I like had less of a fear of fire because I'd already been around fire spinners. And so I didn't, because the fuel that you use for fire spinning and fire eating doesn't burn as at hotter temperature. That's why like when I'm fire eating, I can like touch the, you know, the wicks on my body, is because like it burns hot, but not as hot as other flames. And so I already was familiar with coming in contact with fire and like how to do it safely without burning myself. So I was like, I want to try. And so I traveled to Adelaide and I did a workshop with Leopard Lass to learn how to fire eat. And she showed me how to, you know, like touch it on my tongue and how to like extinguish it. And I was like, oh, wow, that's so cool. But then I was like too scared. I was so scared. And I had the theory and the knowledge.
I don't associate that word with you. Fear. But okay, good to know. You were scared.
And I waited. And I think I waited 2-3 years. I don't know. And then I did. And I was like sort of like intermittently practicing. And then I did a second workshop with her. And like reinforced all of this. And I was like, no, you know it. There's like, you just got stop being such a baby. And so then I sort of started actually just performing with it. And then it's like anything, the more that you do it, the easier it gets. And so once I got a knack for eating it, it became easier and easier. And then I had a better sense of what I could and couldn't do and how the fire worked and, and I got literally burnt enough times that I figured out like, well, that's a mistake. Don't do that. Don't do that again. These are the things you need to watch out for. And so now I'm like, I've become very comfortable with working with fire. And since that, I've also now gone to the US and done more fire eating, fire breathing, fire vapor trick upskilling in the US. And so, yeah, I think it's just a lot. It is a lot of training and a lot of practice. And now it barely feels risky because I do it so often that I feel like I know what I'm doing.
Reflecting back on me seeing fire twirling, fire eating from a Sri Lankan context, we have that in a lot of our parades. When we, do religious processions, there's a lot of fire twirling, fire eating, and those people practice for years.
Yeah,
there's
totally.
Still a lot of injury.
Yeah, totally.
I'm carrying a camera around with a fire breather, fire eater, whatever the technical term is, and they're having 3 or 4 glasses of milk.
Yeah.
Because somehow, this was, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, somehow the whatever you drink to breathe fire, it curdles with the milk and then passes out fast, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Are there safer, better techniques now?
Fire is dangerous. Like fire is dangerous. It's not a stunt, it's a skill. So there's no trick to it. Sometimes people are like, what do you put on your skin first so that you don't get burned? I'm like, I don't, like, there is no like magic fix. It is actually just dangerous. And fire breathing in particular is like, it's the most dangerous one because you run the risk of not only swallowing the poison, but also there's the biggest risk of fire breathing is chemical pneumonia.
Mm-hmm.
So if you aspirate, if you breathe in the fumes from it, you can get chemical pneumonia, which is really serious. And so not only can you get chemical pneumonia from the air droplets being in the air and you breathing it or it falling on you and you inhaling it, but also if you swallow the fuel and then you vomit it back up, then the fuel, because it's an oil, can like line your throat, and then it creates more fumes, and then you can inhale the fumes, and that can also cause pneumonia. This is why some poisons say like don't make people throw up, or like make sure it passes, or like sometimes people have to get their stomach pumped as opposed to So it is truly just risky. It's probably gotten safer in that maybe people have more knowledge of like what fuels to definitely not use, and paraffin has become more and more refined, so we can get like the ultra pure without mixing in more citronella and other chemicals. But at the end of the day, it's just a dangerous skill. The biggest thing for me is learning about treatment of burns, because the thing about a burn is you get the burn and then it continues burning, it continues cooking. The cooking continues long after the heat source is removed, which is why, if you burn yourself in the oven, they say you've got to run it under cold water for such a long time. It's because you're trying to stop that cooking process. And the big problem with performing fire is there's often no ability. You can't be like, I'm just going to spend 10 minutes with my body under the tap, And so what I learned after getting a burn down my chin and my chest was I went to the hospital and they put these burn aid patches on me, which is like a burn aid solution, which I think is like tea tree and melaleuca or something. And what that does is it does that cooling effect, the same as running water, but you don't have to sit under running water. So now I have so many burn patches in my kit. I've got the burn spray. And so as soon as I get a burn, even if it's just like a little, like it feels a little bit uncomfortable, I'll immediately put the spray on. It'll stop the cooking and then it won't turn into a burn. Whereas if I feel that uncomfortable sensation and leave it, it will turn into like a pretty hectic burn that will later on blister and peel. So I've learned about really quick treatment, and when I'm doing the quick treatment, how do I treat it? But I think I've got the knack of it now. So I've managed to take a lot of things that probably would have been 3rd-degree burns and turn them into just minor.
But that takes planning and organization. Even when you went to the hospital, you were learning.
Yeah.
What are they putting on me?
Yeah.
Where can I get this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that you being a very organized performer?
I don't know. I think people would tell you, I don't know. Some people will tell you I'm very organized, and some people will tell you that I'm very unorganized. It just depends on the day. I think that what happens is when I have capacity, I will get very, very organized, and I'll build up a big kit of like, this is the box of stuff for backstage that has all the things that we need. And this is all this, and these are all the set lists, and they're all organized. And because I do all of that work in advance, then I'm often like, it's taken care of. I don't need to worry about it. And I think sometimes people only see the lax, the lax side. And sometimes my very organized work that I've done in advance has already been depleted. Items have been taken out of the box, or, I organized things, but circumstances have changed and I haven't updated it. And then I'm like, oh, you relaxed too hard and now it's coming to bite you. So yeah, it swings. It depends on my capacity and energy level and everything. I like to think that I'm organized enough in advance that I can be relaxed later, but occasionally it comes back to bite me.
Occasionally life happens.
Yeah, sure.
Focusing on your performances, they demand a lot of your body and your mind. What are your routines like to set you up for success? Do you cold plunge in the morning? Do you do affirmations? Do you relax? Do you do yoga? What are your routines that help you be the best version of yourself?
I definitely I accept that performing is my job. It is in fact my full-time job. I'm very lucky. I realize not all artists can say that. So it is my full-time job, and I try to treat it as such. So when I've got a performance and I'm like, well, I know that I'm performing tonight, even though I'm only performing in the evening, I still take that awareness through the day. So I'm not going to totally wear myself out and then not have the spoons needed at the end of the day. So there is a little bit of just like of management and accepting that I'm getting paid for the whatever 3 hours that I'm there, but actually the pay covers all of the prep work. I need to put my makeup on, I need to have the costumes, I need to do all of this stuff, and just treating it like a job when I'm doing the hours of administration and the back of house things, giving it the time that it needs. So I think just being prepared up front, having everything ready so that I can be relaxed and ease into it when I get there instead of being flustered helps. Also, I do, with a new mom, you say sleep when the baby sleeps. And I feel similar about show. I'm like, sleep when the show sleeps. Like, if I have the opportunity to rest, I often take it. I'm one of those people. Catch me having a little siesta every day and sleeping in the mornings. I'm not keeping a standard 9 to 5 sleep schedule because I know like I'm going to be working in the night here so I just a lot of, like giving my body the appropriate amount of rest that it needs so that I can be good to go. And I think particularly when I'm on tour. So if I'm in a contract, I'll be doing 5 to 8 shows a week every week. And the toll, like it really adds up. And so there's a lot of things like I'll take magnesium gummies to just try and support my body, being really mindful of what I'm eating so that I've got the right amount of energy. Because it's really hard in the lead up to a show. You can be like stressed and flustered and thinking about the show, and you're like, oh, well, I don't want to eat like a whole lot of carbs because I'm going to feel really heavy and uncomfortable when I'm on stage, and I don't want to, I don't want to eat too early, or I don't want to eat that, and just being really mindful of actual nutritional balance so that my body is properly fueled. That took a while to get the hang of, particularly in the early days where I'm so busy I don't have time to eat. And then I would do the show underfueled and then, you know, be like really mind foggy and feel achy and feel really bad. I'm like, yeah, of course, because you didn't treat your body well. Similarly, if I'm doing fire performances, I really need to be hydrated, because if I'm not, it feels bad. And I also do sideshow. So I do mental floss, where I put a balloon up one nose and I pull it out my mouth, and I like will stretch the balloon, or sometimes I'll put a straw through my face. And if I'm dehydrated, that is so uncomfortable. And then I spend days being like, I think I'm getting a cold. I've got a sore throat. I'm like, idiot, you just didn't take care of your body. You just didn't take care of your body. So I've gotten a lot better at now saying, oh, I'm doing a mental floss tonight. I need to not just scull a glass of water right before I go on stage. I actually need to, take care of my body and be appropriately hydrated and appropriately nourished. And yeah, lots of like recovery stuff. Like I try and do like stretches and things as I need to. I'm not the best at it, but trying to build in that routine of preparing my body and resetting my body after the fact. That's the one I still need to get better at, is when I finish a show, I should take a moment to just stretch and like release everything. And I often finish the show and I'm like, yay, let's go, we're gonna have food, yeah, you know, and then I just don't do that part. But it's tricky.
Now let's talk about some other acrobatics you have to do in life. Rachel has to balance the needs of 2 young children.
Yes.
How does that fit in?
It's so difficult. And I mean, I don't think you could ask any parent and they would be like, I am nailing it. Do you know? Like I also just think that parenting is a series of contradictions. You're like, okay, what makes a good parent? A parent is someone who is like totally present. A parent is someone who gives their child space. A parent, does this, but a parent does that. And so many of the defining values are in contradiction to one another. Even when you're trying your best, it's still, even if you're doing everything right, you're also doing everything wrong. It's just the nature of the challenge that is parenting. And so I think you can only do the best you can do. On one hand, I say to myself, I'm a really good mum because I'm setting an example for my kids. I'm demonstrating to them like dedication, hard work, backing yourself, prioritizing your own needs, going for your dreams, working really hard, and the payoff of that. I'm teaching them all of those things. But then the flip side of it is, they're getting dragged on tour. They're having to sit backstage a lot. They're having to, a lot of the time, like I can't be around because I'll be on tour for a while. And so they'll be without me for chunks of time, or, I'll be out working late at night. And so I'll be like, okay, I've just like leftovers for you. It's a really hard balance. It's just a really hard balance. And I don't think there is this one is right and this one is wrong, because the needs of the kids flow. And one day maybe the kids need more of my time, and one of the days they need less of my time. And I can't plan my work schedule in advance and allow it to match that sort of nuance. Because if they're like, this is a time when I need you more, I'm like, I hear that, but my tour's already booked. Do you know? Like, so it's, I do the best that I can, and it's just tricky.
Does it take lots of conversations with them?
I guess I'm like, there's a lot of conversations with them. But I mean, there's also not a lot of conversations, as in, I think a lot of it just happens. I don't think they don't come to me and say, I'm upset because you went on tour. Do you know? It's more like I reflect on the situation and I think, oh, it was probably rough on them. It's hard. It's a hard balancing act, but it's hard for everyone. It's easy for me to be like, because I'm a performer, it's hard. But I think like, if you're a shift worker, it's hard. I think if you're tired, if you have chronic health, it's hard. I think if, it doesn't matter.
Parenting is a tough gig.
Yeah.
No one said that to us before, but it is a tough gig.
Yeah.
Speaking of tough gigs that you seem to love, while you're on stage and performing, there is a lot of exposure of you to many different audiences, many different opinions, many different people, many different backgrounds.
Oh, yes.
Does that leave you vulnerable?
Yeah. Yeah, it's the thing I was saying before, which is the more that you're perceived, the greater perceptions people have on you. And that has been a really tough one to get a hang of, because there are times where I'm like, I just don't want to be perceived. I'm tired. I just want to be able to be me and not have to like worry about what people think of what I'm doing. But it's just that's not how things work. And there's also, I'm very lucky that I do have quite a bit of visibility, and I guess I have a platform. People can see me, people hear what I've got to say, and with great power comes great responsibility. And I do feel that I need to be mindful about what decisions I'm making, because actually there's a whole lot of people who perceive it and see it, and then it reflects back on them. I remember I had a friend who was running a show, and the show had a bit of a problematic name, or like people were complaining about the name, and they were like, this is making us feel bad, and my friend was saying, yeah, but I identify with that word. I should be able to use this name. Like, me as a person, this is why my value set, I don't feel that way. And I'm like, it's true that you hold these values for yourself, and this is true for you, but because you've got this platform, you actually have a greater responsibility to consider other perceptions beyond just your own perception. And even if you're like, this is true for me, this is enough, this is acceptable for me, I need to say, well, even though it's acceptable for me, I can acknowledge maybe it's not acceptable for these other people, and so I'm going to curate my decisions based on that. And I'm not going to curate my decisions in my own personal life, in my own personal circle that only affect me. But if I'm putting on something publicly and I'm doing a show and I'm, and it's in the public arena, I think it's really important and like a real honor to have the opportunity to consider how it affects other people and how the perceptions may look, and like edit accordingly, because you have the opportunity to like uplift people or to let them down. And I'd rather everyone be uplifted,
That's a fantastic ability. I just asked you about being judged, and you told me how to make even that situation a positive. You just said, I'm going to look at how we frame these things. I'm going to look at it from the audience perspective. I'm going to find a way that everything could be uplifted. I've asked you before where that comes from, and you gave me a fun, happy answer. So I'm going to delve in a little more to go, where do you actually get this skill and resilience from? Tell me a time where you've been publicly criticized or felt hurt, and how did you recover from it?
You're not gonna like any of my answers. I see. The thing is, I've been the most hurt and felt the most when I've been privately criticized. When someone who I really love and I care about, like my parents or my partner or someone, they come and they criticize me, and they're like, that work that you did wasn't as good as your other one. It was really naff. It was blah, 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 blah. That's when I feel really like, oh, like that's what really hurts. Public criticism, much less so. And I think it's because I know that the more you're perceived, the more perceptions people put on you, and the perceptions that they're creating are on their. It's not on me, Rachel the person. It's on this idea of me, idea of Jazida, which is not really grounded. It's grounded in their reality, not in my reality. And so when people are like, oh, Jazida, blah, 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 she does this, or she thinks this, or she does that. I'm like, you've never met me. You've literally never had a conversation with me. It's amazing that you've put these values. This is why I'm a bad person, or this is why I'm shit, or, I'm like, It's like in the same way, if people are like, Jazita is amazing and she's blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, you've never met me. It's similar to what I was saying about the body stuff. Like, you can give me a compliment and you can give me an insult. The two, like, throw it in the bin. Neither of them are real because it's not what it's about, you know? You're like missing the point. Like, if you've got something to say about my artistic merit or like the work that I'm creating, and you say, the work that I'm criticizing the work that you've made, and these are my notes. This is what I think you did wrong. Then I can take the note and I'll say, regardless of how politely or impolitely it was delivered to me, I can look at the feedback and say, oh, okay, I didn't like how they said it, but the point that they're making is sound, and now I'm going to incorporate that into my work. How can I tweak the work to address that criticism? Or a lot of the time I'll say, oh, you fundamentally have come at it from a completely different perspective from me. You've misunderstood the message that I'm trying to, the purpose of what I'm doing. And sometimes that's okay. Sometimes I'll say, oh, you're just looking at it through a different lens, and that's not the lens I'm interested in which case I can reject that feedback. Or I can say, oh, you haven't understood what I'm trying to say. Okay, how can I adjust the way I'm saying it so that you can understand? And I think that, yeah, it's all just, I'll just take it as the feedback that it is on my work. When people are like criticizing me, the person, that's when it's much harder. And this is why I say private criticism is much more hurtful, because I'm like, oh, you know me, the person, and you're like, it is directed at me and that feels bad. Whereas criticism directed at Jazita, the entity, I'm like, it's not real. That's, you know, yeah. I mean, it can still always be hard when people are saying the most shit. And not even people talking shit, which happens. Oh my God, does it happen? But things like putting in a grant application. And I'm like, I'm making this show. It's my story. I'm sharing this thing. It's very intimate and vulnerable. Means a lot to me. I've put my whole like heart and soul into it. And then if the funding gets rejected, I'm like, you're not just rejecting my idea. You're rejecting me as a person and everything that I stand for. And it's not just that you don't like my work. It's that you don't like me, you know. And it's really easy to fall into these cycles. But I think the nature of funding is you have to throw 100 darts at the board and hope that one will stick. And being an artist is largely about rejection, because you know, if you're like applying to things all of the time, you're going to be getting a lot of rejection. That's the nature of being an artist. And myself as a producer and curating work and booking lineups, I know that there's a lot of times where I will reject an artist. And it's not because I don't value their work or I don't think their act is amazing or whatever it is. I'm like, it's just not a good fit for what's happening right now. And I think I'm much better at accepting and understanding that and feeling like, okay, it's just not a good fit. This is not a good fit. And not allowing it to be taken too personally. That's not the answer you wanted, is it?
That is exactly the answer I wanted. And I'll also take a moment to tell you why I love your response. A lot of the time, performers, artists, people, we get caught up in other people's judgment. But if only those people know how harshly we criticize ourselves,
oh, totally,
they will stop talking.
Yeah.
Or how much we go, oh my God, I'm not good enough to do this, or this is making me feel bad. But you framed it so eloquently to say that the people closest to you matter the most.
Yeah.
You also went a step further. That's why I'm thinking, am I speaking to a performer I really like or a really, really, really super smart intellect?
Oh my God.
Because you went a step further to say it's not just the criticism, even the praise. Like, thank you, but I'm going to keep going because I know what works for me. A lot of the time we get caught up in the flattery of praise. But that's also when we start going, oh, you were praising me and suddenly you're criticizing me. So we are making ourselves open to that.
Yeah.
I love the framing of good things aren't as good as they are, but bad things aren't as bad as they are also. We can always recover. We can always find a better version of ourselves. You've spent years performing, building an image, building sets, building up Jazida. How do you promote Jazida? How do you get yourself out there to be, in shows around Australia, traveling overseas, headlining acts? How do you get yourself out there?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I mean, at the core of it, it's a hustle, right? It's a hustle culture. You got to hustle. You hustle the gigs. You hustle, hey, I'm traveling to Queensland. Do you have spots available? Could I do a thing? I'm going to be here in these dates. Are you available? There's a lot of like actively chasing. But at the start, I remember I spent a lot of effort trying to build it up, trying to book gigs, getting in contact, making networks, forming bonds, bringing people to Canberra, getting them to headline my shows, bridging the national gaps, making networks everywhere, and hustling really hard. And I remember I would talk about it like I would like be lovingly building my little railroad, and I'd pick up my piece of railroad track and I'd kiss it and I'd lay it down and I'd work really hard to lay this track so that I can go the direction that I want to go. And I remember reflecting at one point and saying, I've been building this track for so long and I've put so much love and care into building this track, and now the train is dragging me so fast. I'm holding onto the back of it. I can't get off and I'm exhausted. I don't want to be on this track anymore. And I'm stuck here. And it's a really hard balance between hustling and putting in the work in order to get those opportunities. And when the opportunities just it's too much. And I went through a phase where it was really difficult to say no, like to turn down work. And I was getting to the point where I was like, I can't, this is unsustainable. I will burn out. In fact, I think I'd go so far as to say I probably did, but because at one point I was running my studio and I was on a national tour and I had a grant to develop a new solo show. And each of those three things is a big enough project to take up a year. And I was doing all three at the same time. Exhausting. So now I'm much more mindful of, I'm much more aware that if I lay the tracks very lovingly and carefully now, it can quickly get away from me. And finding that balance is tricky. So I've done a lot less hustling recently. And I'm very fortunate because I'm now at the point in my career where I've done enough stuff that if I just sit back and do nothing, usually people will come to me. I'll still get contacted by other people asking me like, are you available? Lovely. I don't have to chase that. They'll, but the biggest part, and I hate that it's true, but the biggest thing is social media. Oh, I wish I could put social media in the bin. I'm so sick. The algorithms, what you can post, what you can't post, how do you get people to see it? It's just the most infuriating part of being an artist. And it's not, do you know what? I'm not a content creator. What I'm creating is my artwork, the performances that I put on stage. Creating content is a different skill. And there are some really amazing content creators who are terrible artists or artists on stage. And there are amazing artists who are terrible content creators. And I think the fact of the matter is creating content is a lot of what translates to bookings and work. And I hate that that's true. I went for about 6 months where I barely posted. I'd actually gotten quite sick. I think that I actually got long COVID. I was really unwell and I was just trying to really reel back. So I didn't post a lot. For 6 months, I probably posted almost nothing. And then I put up a video, like a fan dancing video, and immediately from posting the video, I got a message being like, hey, we were wondering if you could come and headline our tour in Europe. it proves that social media works. I was hoping that I would post it would make no difference, but it really does it really does work, which sucks.
And that I think is what catches us out also, because then you've got to perform, you've got to come back, create some content, get some content out there, stay relevant, because otherwise what you touched on, the people that are just creating content,
Yeah.
they drown out all of the noise.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and that tends to become a bit of an issue because you are the performer. You are also not just performing, you're curating your acts, you're writing grant applications, you're traveling to get to different places. And all of that is weight. Chatting about social media and the impact social has.
Yeah.
How do you, as a considered creator, use it in a way that shows, your performances in the best light? Noting that, you can't post everything on social. If there is implied nudity or something like that, it's going to get censored and banned and taken down and all of those things. How do you, as a considered creator, use social media?
Oh, that's so tricky. It's hard. It changes too because the rules of social media keep changing. The algorithm, everything, it's sort of fluid. You kind of have to respond. But I try to use social media just as, like what you said, it was just to stay relevant, just to stay at the front of people's minds. So it's less about the content of what I'm posting so much as just being able to pop up regularly, I guess. It is hard because, like you've said, there are so many things that you can't post and can't do. I used to put on shows and then I would create the Facebook event and then I say, okay, promote event, and I try and promote it through social media and pay for the ads, and I would always get blocked. I would get blocked and blocked, and I'd change the image. Is it too much implied nudity? I would change the image. I would do everything and it would still continue to get blocked. And eventually I figured out the reason my event was getting blocked is because the show is called Decadence and Debauchery. The word debauchery was one of the flagged words, which I didn't realize. And so because the URL had the word debauchery in it, it didn't matter what I did. Everything was blocked. And so from that, I had to create a separate web page, which then forward linked. Just nonsense. So it is really hard to stay on top of what you can and can't get away with. I've gotten the hang of editing my photos and videos to censor them, to try and get past the meta gods who are blocking everything. And there's a lot of, I try not to censor myself too much in my text. There's a lot of people who will, if they write the word burlesque, will skip letters on purpose or use symbols so that they're not using the actual word. And there's a lot of hashtags that I used to use the hashtag burlesque, and now I never use that hashtag because I've figured out that one just gets flagged and the content doesn't get shown. But it's tricky because one day something will be okay and not blocked and banned, and then the next day it is, and it's just hard work. I just try to regularly post photos and videos that I think are fun and that I would like to look at, and I try not to fret too hard, aside from getting rid of any nudity that would get me totally banned. I try not to think about it too much, because if I think about it too much, it can and will take over my whole life. I once did a trial with Iconosquare, which is an amazing app that gives you really in-depth, this is the time that your followers are online. Based on your demographic, this is the exact time that you should be posting. Based on the history, this is the hashtag with the most traction. These are the things that you should, really, really overly in-depth reports. How many more followers, how many fewer followers. And I discovered that it is very easy to get really sucked into that world and to mistake self-worth for social media success, which of course is no one wins, So I try and just take it for what it is, which is a tool that I have to use in order to stay relevant and for people to remember me when they're booking things. And just treat it as a little passive task that I've got to do without allowing myself to get too suckered in.
Jazira, tell me, in your performances, how do you connect with social change, or what is your perception of it?
Yeah. So I do think that I have a role within the social change ecosystem. I think that the way that I see the world and where I value things is I really value collectivism, thinking about other people, community, thinking broadly about everyone and the greater good, versus very individualism, being self-driven and thinking about only yourself. So, I mean, those are like two very different models of thinking, individualistic versus collective. And I think in a world that is, I guess, becoming more and more individual, if you look at the political climate, especially in the US at the moment, there's so much that's really focusing on just looking out for number one, just taking care of yourself. Whereas if I don't agree with that, and I want to push for community and connection and social connection, then I have to play my role. I think I think it's called there's a website, I think it's socialchangemap.com. Is that it? Anyway, there's a website, and it sort of says in the social change ecosystem, what are the different roles that people play? Some people are healers, some people are storytellers, some people, there's a different thing that each person can do in order to support this change to prioritize community and the greater people all around you, not just your own individual self. And sometimes the person's role is doing like what you're doing. I'm going to host podcasts, and I'm going to uplift stories, and I'm going to be a storyteller. And for some people it might be, I don't have the energy or the capacity to do that, but I do have the capacity to in my own life reflect on in these ways, or like do these like small things that support collective thinking. So I think that I think that my role is, as with a lot of other artists, sort of sits in the realm of storytelling and connection of people. And I guess the reason I think in these terms is that I used to have a day job. I used to work for the government in Canberra, the ACT government, unheard of, groundbreaking. So I used to work for the government, and I would do my art on the side. And after many years of just doing whatever I wanted, I was like, I want to produce shows. I want to bring artists from interstate. I want them to do like workshops, and this is all fun. And it was much like what I was saying before, where I would just do what I was doing, and then later on I would reflect and be like, oh, actually, I now understand what I was doing it naturally, but now I know why I was doing it. Similarly, I was putting on these shows, I was doing these things, and then at one show, we always used to do a best dressed competition, and the audience would get up. And we did a best dressed competition. Anyone who wanted to get up from the audience could get up. And I looked at the stage, and I was like, more than 50%, more than half of the people who are currently on the stage are either non-binary or trans. That says something really interesting that I haven't interrogated, because that wasn't what I'd set out to do. And I realized that what I was creating, I thought I was just making like fun art shows, but what I was actually doing was I was creating safe spaces where people felt like they were observing authenticity, and therefore they themselves felt that they could be authentic. And that was really interesting. I was like, oh, I'm doing something here that I didn't even mean to do. I didn't even realize I was doing. And so then I went to the Millhouse clinics. So Millhouse do social enterprise incubation programs. And I worked with them, and I worked with the Millhouse Clinic, and they took university students and got them to do an interrogation into my audiences and my students and people who've interacted with my productions and my work, and did a whole lot of data tracking. And what they found was 89% of the people who'd interacted with my services felt that it improved their mental health or that of the people around them. And we also found that there were 14 times, is that right? I can't remember. Anyway, there was significantly more LGBTQI people in my spaces than in the general public. And so I was like, oh, that's really interesting. So what I thought was I was just having fun and doing what I liked. But what I was actually doing was creating these spaces and, making change, like positive change that was accidental. And so once I knew that was what was actually happening, I was able to be a lot more focused in the way that I went about and the way that I was curating. And that was when I quit my day job and decided to go for this full time, because I thought, actually, this is not only is this really meaningful for me and I get a lot out of it and it's very joyful, but this is actually making like quite a big change and is really positive for other people and it's worthwhile investing in. And I'm gonna put all my eggs in this basket and I'll give it a go full time.
And that's such a rewarding thing or rewarding space to be in, that you've taken the time to analyze your audience, seen the change in your audience, and fill that space where somebody needs to, enjoy a performance but feel safe.
Yeah.
Is that something you have now been more intentional about in your shows moving forward?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, yes. After that chunk of research, I redid my plan and everything to make sure that I was ensuring that my lineups, which had always up until that point been very diverse, just making sure that I was maintaining that, because I realized that that's where a lot of the value was. And things like what I was saying, where I would be given opportunities and I would look on it and I'd be like, actually, that doesn't align. What if what I'm trying to do is curate safe spaces and what I want to do is uplift lesser heard voices, then me taking this gig, even though it might be a dream gig, it doesn't tell that same story. So yeah, it really has influenced my decisions.
You're very conscious of your value set. You're conscious of the impact you're having and the change you want to see in the world. How does an artist like you manage your finances?
Oh my God, terribly. I feel like all artists struggle. That's a hard thing, especially, like I said, I do this full time. So it is really difficult. But a big part of it, not dissimilar to the wearing many hats, is that anything I can do in-house, I do. Once upon a time, I would pay a lighting designer, I would pay a technical operator, and I would pay someone to mix my music. And it's gotten to the point where I'm like, I actually need to just do it myself. So now I've got my own lighting desk, and when I build shows, I build all the lighting states. And so now, instead of having to have two technical operators who build the show, I just need one person to monitor the desk, and my QLab program times all of the lighting states, and that's now all automated. And I do that myself. Similarly, now I've learned how to mix more music, and I do a lot more of that myself in-house. I do a lot of the lighting design in-house, etc. So some of it is about creative control and and making the decisions for myself, and a lot of it is financial, like budget driven. Like, how can I reduce the spend so that we can get a maximum impact?
Jazida is a very confident, fun performer, open to the public eye. What's Rachel like?
I was talking to my friends last night, and I was saying it's a showgirl exterior with what was the phrasing? I'm going to find it. Oh, because I was trying to figure out, how like comedians will come out and say, I look like Dora the Explorer if she woke up at some weird quips like that. I was like, I've been trying to figure out what my quip would be. And it said, wait, is it serving full showgirl fantasy on the outside and sensory overload management on the inside? I feel like, I'm like, for all of the like bravado of Jazida. I think at the end of the day, I'm just a delicate, fragile artist, which is what sits behind all of them, you know. And I think as well, to be an artist, you have to have um like sensitivity, because you can't convey or share emotions without really truly feeling them. Um, and so I think there's also an idea that, you know, it's my role to, if I encounter a feeling or an emotion, to really like properly explore it, to really interrogate it, because only through that interrogation can then I turn it into art. And so, you know, I'm like a very emotional person and I'm very you yeah, very I get very overwhelmed very easily. I'll finish my shows and then I'll be like, I would like to go now, you know, because it's uh sometimes when I'm at shows, I'm like, I wouldn't attend this. You know, like if I was in this audience, I would be too, like I would get too overwhelmed. And I just want to, you know, just do my own thing.
You work a lot on your acts and your performances. You're careful about what you eat. Too stretching sometimes. Not as often, maybe. But what are your routines to make sure you're really strong in terms of mental well-being?
Yeah. Well, I mean, all of the usual things. I have my regular therapy sessions and my psych sessions, and I do my regular work. I was saying before the cameras turned on that some of the questions that you've prepared are even more in depth than those that my therapist would ask me. Um,
My new career.
yeah. uh, yeah, so I've got my network of specialists, and I've also got like a really good support system. I've got really good friends. Uh, I'm also a person who is diagnosed with complex PTSD, and so I already have a pretty um, rigid management around my mental health, just to take care, because I can so easily like be put into fight or flight mode. Um, so a lot of just those sort of strategies to support my mental health. I use an app called Finch, which I love. It's a very cute little bird, and you do self-care activities, and every time you do a self-care activity, the bird gets rainbow stones, and then you use the stones to buy it clothes and decorate its apartment and it's just very cute, and it's like a really nice way. I wake up in the morning, I'm like, yes, I made my bed, achievement, well done me. You know, and I'll be like, I've got to say my affirmations. Okay, I'll read and I'll put it in the app. I'm like, today my affirmation is this, and I'll read it to myself, and I'm like, yes, good, well done me. Like, it's just a really good I really like the Finch app because it's on my device. It gives me that really quick dopamine like hit, the same way that social media does, but it's like a lot more positive for my well-being.
I'm very curious to understand the balance between a close circle of friends
Mm-hmm.
and a therapist. What are the similarities and the differences?
I mean, I guess the therapist is qualified, or like the psychologist particularly, they know strategic things to say and not to say. I know that when I was younger and I wasn't doing pretty when I had really bad eating disorder, I remember someone, you know, saying things that were totally kind spirited, things like, well, you don't look underweight, or, you know, like you could, like, you still look really healthy, which are like they're meant to be compliments, but me in my messed up headspace at the time was like, you're saying that I'm not thin enough, you know, like, just really problematic. So I think there is something about your friends can be really well intended, but can actually accidentally make things worse, which is why it's so great to have specialists. I also think that friends are really good for just talking out what's going on. This is what's happening in my life. This is how I'm feeling. And then you sort of just like share the scenario. I think, or I feel for my circumstance, and it's different for everyone, but for me, if I go to like a therapist or a psych or someone, and then we just talk through what's going on. He said this, and then I said this, and I feel this way. I'm like, that's just gossip. That's not therapy. I feel like a good therapist, you'll talk about the situation that's going on, and eventually the therapist will be like, okay, the thing that we're dealing with is fear. The thing that we're dealing with is grief. The thing that we're dealing with is anger. Let's work on processing this emotion as opposed to just like talking in circles about what's going on, because often talking about the thing that's upsetting you can just end up like re-traumatizing you and putting you into a big spiral. Whereas, yeah, I think a really good therapist, the talking part, the back and forth talking part about what's going on should be very brief and only designed to contextualize the work. Then you go into the actual psychotherapy. And maybe that's like hypnosis, or maybe it's like a EFT, or maybe it's EMDR, or maybe it's some sort of like physical process or something that you follow, timeline therapy, whatever, to address the problem. So I think, does that...
It does.
Yeah.
It does. Because the old Asian mentality is, just speak to a friend or speak to grandmom. But their intentions are good. They're just not professionally trained to build you up. They're great people.
Yeah. And but also like they don't know how to do the psychotherapy modalities. That's why it's like a degree.
Right.
Yeah.
In terms of drive and motivation, you've been doing this for over a decade, a couple of decades. What is the legacy you hope you would leave back?
Well, I think the part of me that still entangles self-worth and productivity wants to say things like, I want people to look back and say, oh, Jazida was prolific. Her output was so much. She did so many things and she did such a variety of skills, and she it's all of that part of me wants my answer to be about churn. Look at my output, look at my productivity, look at my success, look at my accolades, blah, blah, blah. But I think that much better, what I would really like to aspire to is, I think Mark Maron on his podcast, which says, it's easy to stand by your morals until someone's offering to buy them out. And I think about that statement so many times. I sometimes will see artists or other people making decisions, and I think, yeah, it was easy for you to stand by that moral until you got offered that paycheck, and now suddenly you're happy to turn your back on this thing that you had previously claimed to believe, And I have noticed in my own career, there have been a few big opportunities where I've been offered this like really great thing. And it's like, there was one opportunity that I was given, and it was like truly one of my like dream checklists. Like, this is the thing that I want to achieve. This is a big goal, in my life in terms of where, opportunities to perform and what I want to do. And I remember looking at it and reading the contract and being in negotiation with them, and then reflecting back and saying, like, actually, this doesn't align with my value set. I actually don't think I feel, even though this is like my dream, I actually, now that I'm given the opportunity for it, I actually don't think I do feel comfortable taking it. And I remember turning down that opportunity. And there's been a couple of instances like that, which, I mean, like, I guess some people would perceive as bad career decisions. So you've you've chosen to do things that don't accelerate your career in that particular way. But I'm like, but at the end of the day, the choices I'm making are not about trying to get like the biggest, bestest, most shiniest career. What I'm trying to do is to like create work that aligns with my value set, and so that I can look back and be proud of what I've done and feel that like the things that I've created, I talk about the workhorse, the cash cow, and the unicorn, and, the things that I want. I want to make sure that there's that good balance, so that if I am, attending to a workhorse or a cash cow, that doesn't just become my entire existence, and that I am actually putting my focus and my energy and my care into the work that I value, that align with my morals, that align with my value set, and that, like, I guess I want people to look back and be like, ethically, her steps. I like what she chose to do with her like time and platform. Yeah.
When are you happiest?
I'm very happy on stage. I'm very happy when I'm doing my gemming. I just like put the glue down, and then I put the rhinestones one by one. And for me, the rhinestoning is, I guess, the equivalent of someone else's gardening or knitting. You know, it's like a repetitive, basic task, almost meditative, you know, and you're just like, I just feel the calm, serene of like just enjoying the sense of slow accomplishment in doing this very mundane task. I find that very joyful and relaxing. But yeah, I guess, yeah, I mean, I'm happiest in lots of situations. I'm happiest when I'm connecting with people. So either connecting with people on stage or connecting with people like my family and just being able to, you know, be close. Often the best performing experiences are not when I'm on stage, but usually right before I go on stage when I'm with the other people. And I'm like, we're so lucky that we get to be here. I'm so happy that I'm here with you. This is a really cool thing that we get to share, you know?
If somebody wants to connect with you, an aspiring dancer, performer, or somebody wants to, you know, book you in for an event, where do people find you?
Social media. After talking the most shit about it, that is in fact the easiest way to contact me. My Instagram is jazita.burlesque. Otherwise, you can email me at jazitaproductions@gmail.com. Or you can check my website, which is jazitaburlesque.com. But, you know, I'm so bad at updating my web. My website is so out of date all of the time.
It's because you do so many things.
Yeah, it's because I don't care about it. That's why.
Jazita will always and continue to be one of my favorite performers that I have seen. Thank you for your time today to place firmly in my mind and everyone listening in that Rachel's super smart. So if you have any data science, business problems or production problems, reach out. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, your experience, and your intelligence. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. A massive thank you to Crown Plaza Canberra for hosting this episode of the podcast. If you are looking for really nice accommodation in close proximity to Canberra CBD, or if you want well-appointed meeting spaces, check out Crown Plaza Canberra. Thank you again.